everyone, and thank you for joining us here on the Recruitment Roundup podcast, which is brought to you by BMS Performance. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, BMS Performance is a specialist sales and marketing recruitment consultancy. For the last 30 years, we've been helping businesses across the UK recruit for vacancies at every level. I'm your host, Mike Leather, and every week I'll be joined by a new guest where we'll get stuck into the latest trends in regards to recruitment. We'll talk about insights, we share ideas, we share experiences, and ultimately we look to provide value to fundamentally help you, whether or not you're a hiring manager, a business leader, or part of an internal talent team, to recruit smarter, faster, and more effectively. Welcome everyone to episode 2 of season 2 of the Recruitment Roundup podcast, where today I'm joined by my colleague Rob Coombs. Rob, welcome back onto the show.
Thanks for having me back. Yeah, good. How are you getting on?
All right. All good. Looking forward to this conversation. We're going to be getting stuck into the subject of counter offers, and then going to be providing the audience and listeners with a couple of tips at the end of the podcast in regards to how you can manage candidates before they start. We're definitely in an environment now where we've certainly seen more candidates taking counter offers, and unfortunately a few more candidates dropping out before starting. So we thought it'd be a great time to put together a podcast like this, and yeah, we look forward to sharing it with everyone. So to introduce Rob's in his 10th year at BMS Performance. He's one of our top performing national account managers, and someone that I've had the pleasure of working with for must be about 6-7 years now, Rob.
Yes, I think so. Very much so.
Yeah. He spends all day, every day, speaking to candidates and companies about all things sales recruitment. He's right in the thick of it, so I could think of no one better to bring on to talk about this subject today. So here he is.
Thanks again.
All right, Rob, so why don't we kick off by talking about in a bit more detail about why we've decided in particular to do this right now. I'll just give a bit of a segue into it, but if you could give your take, that'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a topic of conversation, not just for us, of course, internally. I'm seeing it a lot on LinkedIn within our peer network in the recruitment world, but also with those companies that are hiring directly that are asking for my take on it. They give me a bell and ask about it, and it's happening more and more. And I think there's a number of different internal and external factors for businesses as to why this is happening. I mean, internally, arguably operating in recession kind of environments at the moment without officially being in one. So companies have been a little bit more careful. So obviously not wanting to lose people because of the expense of hiring. And of course, attracting talent is hard work as well, as we've known for the last 3 or 4 years. So they're doing everything they can to keep their best people. On the flip side, from a candidate applicant perspective, a lot of uncertainty out there for families, jumping maybe into something new. With the uncertainty of mortgage rates going up and things, money does talk, a bit like in football, doesn't it? So yeah. I think we're in a weird vacuum of counter offers again. We had this conversation 18 months ago where it happened a lot, then it's gone quiet, and now it's blown up again. And it's always due to usually some external factors that make people a bit twitchy. So I think it's great that we're talking about it now.
Yeah, and for the audience, what we want you all to get out of this, and in some instances we might not be teaching you anything new, but if you come away from this with a couple of ideas of how to spot counter offers or the risk of a candidate taking a counter offer a little bit earlier in the recruitment process, that can save you a lot of time and money overall, and certainly at the back end of it. And also as well, a bit of an understanding as from our experience to why people are taking counter offers at the moment, what sort of counter offers are most appealing to candidates as well. So why don't we get into that, Rob, then? Why do candidates take a counter offer then?
Yeah, as I touched on it then. So in my experience, especially in the last 3 months, there's been a number of factors. I'd say number one, it's down to money. As you can see all over the news with the public sector situation when it comes to pay rises and what have you, and they're asking for it. The ONS have been showing how much pay rises have gone up in the last 12 months across the private sector, obviously, which we deal in a lot more. And as a result, when somebody is handing in their resignation, company panics and throws another 5, 10, and in your instance, you've seen 15, 20 grand counter offers. That's gonna be a bit of a lottery win, at least for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, isn't it? For that individual. Other reasons people are taking them that we found, of course, again, linked to that cost of living, but also that uncertainty piece. If they've been in a role over 2 years, then they are a lot safer than they are if they've been in a role less than 2 years. And therefore, by making that jump across, sometimes get itchy feet about that longevity just in order to pay the bills and the mortgage. But what I've seen a lot, again, it's probably come out of the pandemic, is this whole idea of flexible working, not just because people don't want to travel into an office or do this and that and the other. It's because of the family dynamics and being there for families. And I've had a lot of candidates talk to me about this a lot more pre-process, and the 1 or 2 counter offers we have had is due to things that are outside of a business's control, which are down to family ill health changes, kids needing to be picked up from school, this, that, and the other, and that new role that they're going to, whereby they're going to have to give 150% to get up and running. They don't then have that flexibility. So identifying things like that at the front end of a process is going to help understand why people take counter offers or even consider them.
So you mean companies that have said to the candidate or their current employee, look, what we can do is provide you with more flexibility in your role. So maybe you come into the office less, or you've got more flexible in terms of your working days, working patterns, that sort of thing. You mean,
Yeah, definitely. That gives them that opportunity to pick good kids up or drop them off at school or what have you. Or if they need to be close by for an elderly relative that they're looking after, they can do that. Whereas they might be going to company X, where it's a field-based sales role and they need to have 3 or 4 nights away from home a week. And it's obviously not going to happen. So they thought that they were going to join their business and thought, we've got our person here, fantastic. They've verbally accepted. Next thing you know, they've spoken with their family and their current employer says, well, you don't have to go away 2 or 3 nights a week. Stay here and do this, that, and the other. All right, fantastic. Path of least resistance, of course.
Yeah, we're going to talk shortly about the difference between your demotivated candidates and your dissatisfied candidates, because they're 2 slightly different people, should we say? I was going to use a different word then, but 2 slightly different people. I think in my experience and what I've seen, to put my 2 pence into it, the large majority of candidates, when they're coming onto the job market at the moment, they're looking for increases of 10 to 20%. In terms of the basic salaries. And if their motivations are purely monetary, then a lot of the time we are seeing current employers of those people be aggressive now in the counter office for all the reasons that you've said. It's a hard market to recruit in. Yes, businesses have tightened up. There are in some industry sectors less jobs in those sectors now than there was 12 months ago. Companies are aware of this, so it becomes harder for them to recruit. We're not exactly seeing a booming candidate market either. The candidate market is pretty steady compared to what it was 6 months ago. It's not grown massively. The companies know it's harder to recruit, and we're seeing skill shortages in a lot of sectors as well. So companies again know if they lose this particular experience, it'll be very hard to actually recruit it again. There was a situation that one of our colleagues had whereby a candidate was the last salesperson employed in this particular company. He'd gone to resign and given him a 15 grand pay rise to stay because the company just could not afford to lose him, and they broke the bank to keep him. There's other scenarios where candidates have been offered promotions, because their reason for leaving might have been lack of career pathway. A company can solve that 9 times out of 10 if they really want to keep the candidate. But we're seeing companies become more aggressive, I think, in terms of what they're putting on the table. And then you've got candidates are more willing to accept the counter offers because of everything that we've discussed. They don't want to be in that situation where they might be last in, first out as well. So there's all this coming into play. I guess the main point of this particular part of the episode is to help the audience, hiring managers, be able to spot counter offers or candidates that are going to be susceptible to them. So how can hiring managers do that?
Absolutely. So I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. 1, using a recruiter. to not using a recruiter, because ultimately it's the same recruitment process, but that's where, you know, you got the added value of a third party or directly. So if you're using a recruiter, you want to make sure that part of their process is in that pre-screening piece before they've even been submitted to that opportunity, is that they've got a thorough understanding of what their reasons for leaving are on the day of that conversation. Now, of course, somebody's job search could take 2 weeks, it could take 6 months. And obviously over that period of time, things evolve and change, both internally and externally, as I touched on before. But having that at the front end is obviously going to help the rest of that process, because it's a stick in the sand, and it's something that you can keep referring back to and checking all the way through that process, so you know why that person is wanting to leave the employer that they're at, or why they're on the market or want that job. Yeah. And then, of course, that's, you know, the conversation you have with your recruitment partner. When you're doing things directly, you might have, you're doing it yourself, you might have an internal talent acquisition team, you might have a HR team, whatever. When an applicant is applying to that role and you engage them, one of those first conversations needs to be around that, so that you've got that logged and you've got a brief understanding at the front end. Yeah. And then, of course, all the way through that recruitment process, let's say you've got a 2-stage interview, you're covering it off at first, you're retouching on it at seconds, so that you know that if and when you want to make that individual an offer, what the chances are of, one, them accepting the offer, 2, the response, their expectation of their current employer to counter offer, and 3, what is their notice period? And we'll come on to that in a bit, I'm sure. Because what we're finding at the moment is a lot more people have got 3-month notice periods, which causes its own problems. So therefore, you've got an idea of how long you need to know between offer and them starting of what you've got to do. So that's my biggest piece of advice in the first instance.
Okay, let's press pause on that bit then. So let's just focus on interviews. Yes. So if we're a hiring manager and we're thinking, right, the interview, putting on recruiting directly, let's forget using recruiters for the time being. Yep. So I'm recruiting directly. The interview is the first stage when I can test to see if this person is going to be susceptible to a counter offer. You just touched on reason for leaving, which I think is absolutely crucial. Getting to the bottom of that reason for leaving. We all get wishy-washy answers. I'm looking for career progression. What does that actually mean? What does that look like? Yeah. Why? But it's getting to the why of the reason for leaving. What sort of questions can hiring managers and anyone interviewing a candidate be asking to uncover whether someone is susceptible to a counter offer?
Yeah, I mean, you've just pretty much said the one that I ask a lot myself is, what does progression mean to you? And you know, because it means a lot of things to a lot of people. It actually might mean a change in job title or more responsibility. It actually might mean moving up the ladder in terms of earnings. It could mean a hell of a lot of different things. So really understanding like you say, the why there, by asking, what does progression mean to you? You know, what is it about your current employer that has made you even think about a change? Yeah. What has fundamentally changed within your role that's made you unhappy? Yeah. And, you know, you might want to ask that question around trying to understand if they're disgruntled or if they're disengaged, like you touched on before, and ask something around that to try and get an emotive response to see, is this just something that is a flash in the pan because something might not have gone their way? They might have had a bad month or quarter, or is there something really deep rooted that if they don't change now, that they'll never change in 3, 6, 9 months?
Yeah, I think this is especially more important as well for passive candidates, because you know, we've spoken a lot in season 1 about passive candidates, and your active candidates are people that they're applying for lots of jobs potentially, or they're working with 1, 2 recruiters, and they're interviewing with you, they're interviewing the competition. So they've made that conscious decision, I want to move. Then they are less likely to accept a counter offer because they're actively in the market. But we know the active talent pool is limited at best at the moment. Yeah. And the passive side of the market is really where, you know, your top performers are, and they need encouragement to move from one company to another. It's these type of people and these types of candidates that are the highest risk to a counter offer, because they're not actively looking. Yeah. And it's getting really to the bottom of what's it going to take for them to move. You know, they're not, in some cases, unhappy, and it's understanding what are their drivers for actually moving on, getting to the bottom of that.
Yes.
Because sometimes it comes to more than just extra on the basic in some of these cases as well, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And again, I touched on a football analogy earlier on, but you take the current situation with someone like Harry Kane, top performer for Tottenham Hotspur. Whoever comes in for that individual needs to really understand why he would want that move, but also that the fact is that their current employer, i.e. Tottenham Hotspur, are going to do everything in their power to keep hold of that person. And it's exactly the same in the business world. And understanding those drivers means that you can then put yourself in the right position to, one, get the offer right for the candidate that you want to take on, and two, mitigate the chance of them staying put or turning you down at the last second, especially if they're due to start next week or whatever, and you've lost that time.
Yeah, and we're still very much in a market where it's really important that candidates feel bought in to the company that they're going to be joining. And this can be an awkward question to ask, and listeners might think that's a bit too forward. But I certainly think that if interviewers are asking candidates that they really like, look, we really like you, we think you're a good fit and you'd be great for our business, out of interest, you are a top performer in your current company, what could your current employer do to make you stay? What could they put on the table that would appeal to you? Because you then know where you're at then as well.
100%.
As an employee, you know what you might need to offer financially, professionally, career development wise, in order to beat that potential counter offer. Because if they're a top performer, they're a passive candidate, they're working for a reasonable company, let's suggest that all companies are reasonable, then they're probably going to get a counter offer. So got to get ahead of the game and find out what the chances are and what that counter offer might need to look like for them to appeal to the candidate. And some candidates may be really honest with that and really open. Some might be more reserved, but they'll definitely feel wanted by you. They'll definitely feel wanted.
And another quite forward thinking and probably hidden question to ask as well, if we think about over the years, the hiring managers we've spoken to that say, been bitten by a counter offer because the applicant was only testing the water because they were, again, not an active applicant, because they were trying to strangle for a pay rise in their current place. Well, again, you might, if you love that applicant so much, you might be as bold as to say, out of curiosity, when was the last time your current employer gave you a pay rise? Or, when was the last time you sat down with your current employer and discussed, this progression that you're looking for, or this package, or whatever it might be? Because if they had one 5 minutes ago at the beginning of the financial year in April, then you might be onto a winner because they're not just looking for extra because they've just had one. But if they've not had one for many, many years, and then that counter offer comes in, they again might be more tempted to take it because they've obviously angled for it and got it that way. So again, these hard-hitting questions that hiring managers may not want to ask, I definitely would, because it helps to mitigate your chances of losing out.
Yeah, 100%. Right, so we've covered off the interviews. Let's move on to that period of time when you've had the verbal acceptance, and the paperwork goes out.
Yes.
What sort of red flags could we be looking for there that might give us a feeling something's going wrong here?
You mean from a candidate perspective? Yeah, absolutely. So again, time to signature. One of the things that you can do as a hiring business, of course, is use the wonderful world of technology and have things docu-signed rather than ask for things back in the snail mail. And of course, if you're sending things out that way, you hopefully expect a pretty quick response because it's a few clicks. Anything that's taken a few more days and they haven't given you a precursor as to why that could be, i.e. got another interview that I wanted to attend first, or family holiday, or whatever it might be, that's a red flag. So you want to be addressing that based on that first and foremost. Communication
level's important, definitely. What's your take on companies setting contact points? So for example, we'll get the paperwork out to you today, this being a Monday, the latest we need it back by 12 o'clock on Thursday. Do you think that's too forward, or do you think that's
No, I do think it's good, and it all comes down to candidate journey. We've talked about this in season 1 a lot in terms of the actual recruitment process. So when someone applies, when the first are going to be, when the second's going to be, what the interview process looks like, to be as engaged as possible and enjoyable as possible. I think we talked about last season. It's exactly the same in the offer process and stopping this counter offer, because then at least an applicant, one, knows the expectation, and two, has got those kind of deadlines, etc. It gives the hiring company the knowledge that individual, especially if they're a sales professional, that they're great at working to targets and working to deadlines and what have you. And again, it's a test of commitment. So I've got no qualms with that at all. Again, it's all about that initial fact find, though. What else is happening in that person's world that could stop them from doing that, or why they wouldn't do that straight away?
Yeah. I don't see a downside to it personally. I think we should be testing commitment all the way through the process. And if we're of that mindset, then that helps us stay ahead of any issues before they become major problems. Okay. Yeah. What is your thoughts on a hiring manager arranging a call with a candidate that they've had a verbal acceptance for, to talk to them before they resign? So give them, but so it can be a traumatic experience resigning, especially if someone's been in the company for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and in some cases they've grown up with a business. Then going into resign, it can be one of the most nerve-wracking moments of their life. What's your take on that, on a candidate, on a company giving a candidate a call before they go in to resign?
As a business not using a recruiter, you absolutely should be doing that, and I appreciate that might not be something that comes into their psyche if they're not using recruiters, because of course big part of what we do is exactly this process for the candidate, looking after the candidate side. I mean, one of the phrases that I say more than ever at this point in time is that you will see the best and the worst in the people that you think you know the best when you resign, because you'll either see the best in them because they completely understand it, they support you, they've seen you go through your career, and they wish you all the best because they can't offer you where you're going, which is fine. More often than not, it's the chimp paradox piece, and the chimp side of the brain comes out, and ultimately they have an emotional reaction, and it doesn't go very nicely whatsoever. And it's about having a person on the phone, on a Teams meeting, that you can bounce those ideas off. And if you're a hiring company, and let's say it's a sales director or a national sales manager hiring a salesperson, great. Even better if you can get HR involved, because ultimately that's their skill set, to have that kind of conversation, and definitely talk around, what the pitfalls could be, so that the individual that's going to go and resign isn't shaking like a leaf and is able to do that, and therefore be more susceptible to attacking the counter offer that are inevitably going to come their way.
So put your BMS hat on. So if you were having, let's call it, a resignation brief call with a candidate before you knew they were going to resign, what would you be discussing with them, and what advice would you be giving them?
So it goes back to what I said before. We go all the way back to the beginning of the journey. When a candidate registers BMS Performance with one of our, dedicated consultants, they will have gone through reasons for leaving. And the first thing I'll do is check that. Make sure that the reasons, because this process could have taken a few months, make sure that the way they were feeling at the beginning of their journey is the same that they're feeling now. Try and understand if anything has changed in the last however many days, weeks, months, period of time to the point that they're at now. Then try to get a feel for how excited they are about that offer and the opportunity that they're moving forward to. Because if I don't feel that genuine excitement, red flag. And then understand from there, once you've got all those ducks in a row, right, what's your relation? You should have already found this out, but just reaffirm what their relationship's like with the person that they're going to be resigning with to.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, because if you're taking someone from one business, they might have had other resignations. So I try and find out how many other people have resigned of late, because that does a couple of things. One, you can find out how they're going to react. You're going to find out if they've lost some of their top performers, going to lose another one, that they're going to probably act badly. And three, you can get an idea of how open they are to putting you on garden leave, negotiating notice periods down, etc. And then once that's happened, I will then ask that question about, okay, so how do you feel about resigning? How are you going to go about it? Are you going to do it in person? Obviously, get an email out first and foremost, because you want to get that timestamp. what's the exit interview process? Because again, that's another touch point for that existing employer to throw a counter offer out. So I'm really trying to thoroughly understand this whole process, both mentally, physically, and obviously from a future perspective.
Yeah. Would you ask the candidate to give you a call after they resigned so that it's happened?
Obviously have that conversation beforehand. And then after, I'd also want to get an understanding of the rough time that they're going to do it, so I can be on hand to make sure that I'm there to take the phone call after. Now, if I don't have that phone call, again, red flag starts appearing, then it's a case of following up on that. So bit like what we talked about with the employer putting times and dates on getting offers accepted. It's the same with this resignation conversation.
Yeah. So all that's gone through, and we've seen this happen. So candidates resigned, been accepted. They're on a 3-month notice, which is becoming a little bit more common. As well. And it's not over. Then we've seen people and seen candidates and had the unfortunate experience of someone that has resigned and signed the paperwork only to be chipped away at month on month, and he gets to month 3 and I've actually decided to stay where I am because they put something on the table. So what can we be doing if someone is on a long notice period to continue to keep in touch and assess how susceptible or not they're becoming to a counter offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're talking again from a hiring company's perspective and taking our BMS hats off as a recruiter, there's a number of different techniques that you can do. And I'm speaking to more and more businesses that are all over this, but there's still a hell of a lot of organizations out there that, they think it's done. So you're absolutely right. So as much as an easier phone call once a week, checking in, how they're doing, making them feel like they're part of that fabric already of the organization, just from a communication perspective, other people in the organization reaching out, whether that's salespeople, HR, marketing, etc., having different people involved so that there's less awkwardness on day one. They feel like they know people and they're more connected to that business emotionally as well. Secondly, making sure, one of the things that I've really been trying to nail down with my clients is that onboarding planning conversation is happening pretty much immediately. So you should be knowing where they need to be, what's happening with this company car or whatever it might be, all the equipment, what they're doing in their first 3 or 4 weeks. So it's super slick and organized and they feel like it's, I cannot wait.
Yeah.
And the sooner you get that out, and let's say it's a 3-month notice period, they're waiting 11 weeks for that, but they've got something to look forward to. And then obviously you're continuing on that. You can follow that up with collateral as well. Give them bits that they can be engaging with, because obviously if they're disengaged from their current employer, if you're giving them new, exciting, fresh things to be engaged with, they're more likely to then obviously take that in and hit the ground running. And one of the other things that's happening more and more, and I really like it, and it depends on that company culture you're joining, is get the new person involved in company events that are coming up. So that could be soirees, it could be going out for meals, it could be the odd work after drinks on a Thursday or a Friday, or if it's at Christmas time, get them involved in the Christmas do to meet everybody and have that easy transition. It's a lot harder for somebody to say no to human beings once they've started building those relationships.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I want to just underline this part of the podcast before we finish off with your 3 top tips. If you're a hiring manager, what you need to do is work out, is the candidate in front of me demotivated, meaning that their heart is no longer in it with their current employer, or are they dissatisfied? If it's the latter, that is where the counter offer risk comes in. Because dissatisfied can mean no career progression. I'm not getting paid enough on a basic salary. Flexibility, you touched on it before. That's solvable. The heart's not in it, demotivated piece, no longer have an emotional attachment to that business. It's very, very difficult for that current employer to come back from. The quicker you know which camp your candidate sits in, the easier you're going to be able to manage this whole process. So I hope that piece was helpful and people got a lot from that. It's great for us to have this refresh conversation on it as well, because it's good to chew that pattern, I think. To finish off with, Rob, what would your 3 top tips be right now for companies to help them avoid losing candidates before they are meant to join?
Yeah, I think from everything we've spoken about today, we've done a hell of a lot there. I think the first one is ultimately that open communication throughout the whole process. So from application through to start date, it's just constant comms throughout. Secondly, it's that team engagement piece. And what I mean by that is getting people that are in your business involved with the new potential starter as soon as possible to have as many touch points as possible.
Yeah.
And third and foremost, it's making yourself aware and aligning yourself to what those red flags can be that we've talked about. Because if you're ignorant to them, then your chance of losing somebody significantly rises. If you're on top of them, then you mitigate that risk a lot. Obviously not completely, because we're dealing with human beings, but you give yourself such a much better opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for coming on, Rob. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's good.
Great to have you on again.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Recruitment Roundup podcast. Thank you very much for listening to the show, to watching the show. We really appreciate your support. It would be absolutely fantastic if you could give us a rating on Apple, on Spotify, give us a review. Any feedback really helps and is massively appreciated. So thank you once again for joining us, and we will hopefully see you again next week.